Welcome to Threads of Gold. Today is September 30th, 2025. It's the last day of Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. But you know what? Tomorrow is October 1st, and 47 kids will hear the news that they have cancer. On October the 2nd, 47 more kids will hear the news that they have cancer. And that's going to go on every single day, unfortunately. But at the same time, today is exciting because if you were watching the news today, you saw that an executive order was signed. And from the Oval Office, we even got to see some of our favorite childhood cancer survivors standing right there next to President Donald Trump. This executive order is meant to boost childhood cancer research. I highly recommend that all of you go look it up and see that this is backed by the National Institutes of Health, and this is really good news. I always am looking for good news in the childhood cancer community. Those of us who do advocacy for this, those of us who've been involved in this for a long, long time, we are always excited when we see progress. And this is how progress happens. It happens through increased research efforts. And that's the only way, really, to end childhood cancer for the United States and kids around the world. I'm here today because I was asked when I was at CureFest last week if I would consider coming on and doing a really short podcast. So this is going to be a short podcast to end Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, but to explain why I started Bell Asteri, why this imprint is so important to me and to my husband, and why we chose to invest in it, and why we are continuing to work so hard to publish stories and find ways to share stories from the childhood cancer community. So, for those of you who have never heard this story, let me just say to you that this is something that has a lot of meaning to me, and it's something that I feel is a calling in my life. When I was 7 years old in 1977, if you're good at math, you can figure out my age, 55 if you're not. Um, in 1977, my little baby brother Luke was diagnosed with a very rare type of blood cancer. And he was a year and a half old at the time. My other brother Drew was 5. This is a little bit before my sister Anna was born. But at the time, our family traveled to Houston so that my little brother could begin treatments at Texas Children's Hospital. There was virtually no hope for his survival, and it was a really difficult time for our family. Um, I'm going to fast forward and tell you that the good news is that my brother defied all of the odds and somehow survived. He survived his disease and he survived his treatments. And he's my only sibling that lives near me in North Texas. My brother Luke and his beautiful wife Virginia, who serves on the Bell Asteri Foundation board, are some of my favorite people on planet Earth, and I get to hang out with them a lot. And I'm just so thankful that he's still around. And our family celebrates that. Not long after his treatments, my sister Anna was born, and our family is just so grateful that he's still here. We know we're the lucky ones. Um, I met my husband, Bill, in the early 1990s when we were young, in our 20s. And I found out that when he was 7 years old, his little sister, Michelle, was diagnosed with leukemia. Um, Back in those days, most kids with leukemia made it about 3 months. Michelle survived a whole year. So when she was 6 years old, she took her final breath, and my husband Bill was 8 years old at that time. And there's just no way to explain what that's like for family unless you've been through it. The devastation, the grief, it's not something that you just get over, it's forever. And he still has a big old hole in his heart that won't be filled with anything else because that was his sister, his friend, somebody that mattered to him. And he's going to come on this podcast soon to talk a little bit about that. But we always thought, wow, what a weird coincidence that both of us were 7 years old when we experienced childhood cancer. In fact, I'm one of those rare people who I didn't know that cancer was something that happened to adults because I was introduced to it as something that happened to children, as something that happened to my little baby brother. I always thought cancer was something that only happened to little kids until a few years later when my grandma got cancer and died of cancer. And I'm going to circle back and talk to you a little bit about my grandma in just a moment. But back to the story in 1977 and why Bell Asteri happened. So I was sitting in a room with my dad, and my dad was reading a newspaper. And I was sitting there as a little 7-year-old little girl, and I had a tummy ache. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, my tummy really hurts. And I think the day before, my dad had had a headache. He gets migraines. So when he gets a headache, they're really, really bad. And I was sitting there in my little 7-year-old brain wondering, what's worse, a headache or a tummy ache? And instead of asking my dad, like, hey, what's worse, a headache or a tummy ache? I asked this question, Daddy, what's the worst sickness? And I will never forget this moment. My dad peeked up over the newspaper that he was reading and he said, cancer. And he went right back to reading the newspaper. And it was like a bomb exploded in my head. Cancer. That word, it was just an explosion. Cancer is the worst sickness. And it wasn't just about my little brother Luke. It was about all those other kids at Texas Children's Hospital and just the thought of all of them. They all had cancer. Little kids with the worst sickness. And I just felt this pull of, I've got to do something. Now, a lot of kids who experience what I did will go into the medical field, will think to themselves, I've got to grow up and I've got to become a researcher or an oncologist. I've got to cure cancer. For me, my talents are in the area of writing. That's just what I am. I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. And in fact, I have a degree in journalism because I just love writing so very, very much. And so for me, even as a 7-year-old, I thought, I'm going to write about this. I'm going to write to cure cancer. And I didn't even know what that meant. I mean, I was 7. I didn't understand it, but I just knew that was my calling in life. So years would go by, and I would do a lot of things over the years to do little fundraisers and things that would benefit children's hospitals and kids in the hospital fighting cancer. But it didn't really get super involved in fundraising and advocacy like I would later on. And so fast forward, my husband and I met. We both felt like, wow, this has to be more than just a little bit of a coincidence that we both were 7 when we were introduced to childhood cancer. Of course, my husband's experience was much more profound than mine. He lost his little sister, and he and I are going to chat a little bit about that on October 14th. So check out that podcast. But it was something that just we felt like there was a reason that we were together and we had to do something. So we started and I went back to my idea of writing and what is it that I can do? Do I write about his sister? Do I write about my brother? And then one day, it was 2002. So I was 32 and I was, I had almost like this, I want to call it a dream, but I was awake. So I don't know if you call it a vision or a daydream, but I just, all of a sudden a picture hit my head and could I could see little children with cancer writing books. And I knew in an instant, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not going to write the stories. I'm going to be the facilitator of the stories. So I went to Bill and I was like, Bill, I have this idea. We've got to start a publishing company. We've got to have little kids with cancer writing stories and sharing their stories. And not only them, but their siblings. I mean, these little kids have had so much hit them. This is not okay. And he caught the vision too. My husband is in the oil and gas industry. And so I knew that that wasn't something that he was just going to quit his job and take a risk on in joining the publishing industry. And the publishing industry looked way different back in 2002 than it looks today. But we started kind of exploring different options and writing out a business plan. And then in early 2003, actually January 7th of 2003, one of Bill's friends from college died after a 2-year battle against leukemia. And this is happens to be the friend who got him involved in bull riding. That's a whole other story. Again, you'll hear more about that on October the 14th. But Chad was an amazing young man. He was 30 years old. He left behind a precious young wife and a little baby and a toddler, and it was completely unfair. Um, and Chad's brother had died at the age of 12 of a different type of leukemia. So talk about being hit hard. It's amazing to me what some people have to endure. But that really just planted in us the fact that cancer is something that happens to so many young people, to little children and to young people like Chad. So a couple months later, Bill and I and our 2 children, who were ages 5 and 3 at the time, we got on a plane and we went to Spain. My parents lived in Spain at the time. And we were sitting in there. They lived in this really cool place. For those of you who are interested, they lived in a town called Tarifa. Tarifa is the southernmost town in all of Europe. And so they lived on the beach there. And if you walked out on their balcony, there was Africa. It was really kind of cool. So very fun place to visit. Very windy place too. But we were sitting there in their parlor and we were talking to them about the fact that we really had this great vision. We didn't know how to make it happen, but we really believed we were supposed to do something for people in the cancer community, especially young people. And then it just so happened that we got on the plane and we were flying back. At the time, we lived in a town called the Woodlands, which is north of Houston. So we're getting on the plane to head back to the Houston area. And I was looking out the window and I had just this really strong feeling like really soon we would be walking through the doors of MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. And I couldn't have been more right. I'm going to share more with you about this story later, but suffice to say, when cancer strikes, it does not care about your age. It does not care about your life circumstances or what's going on with you at all. And in our case, it certainly didn't care that we were in our 30s and that we had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. And it struck my husband. Stage 4, highly aggressive, completely incurable blood cancer that had metastasized to his bones. And so instead of planning to start a publishing company, we started working hard to save his life. Now, I won't go into all of the years that followed, but to tell you that we got involved in so many incredible organizations. We started doing fundraising, we started doing advocacy. We did that through MD Anderson Cancer Center, where his life was saved. We did that through what was then known as the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Today it's called Blood Cancer United. We participated in team and training because we both were athletes. We had come from a swimming background, but we got involved in triathlons and running marathons. To watch my husband go through almost 3 years of cancer treatments and come out the other side to cross the finish line and become an Ironman triathlete, words cannot describe that joy. If we got busy raising our children, finishing raising our children. And in 2018, when our youngest graduated from high school, we left the Houston area and came to North Texas. And it wasn't long after that that we really got kind of involved with some of the things at the American Cancer Society and doing some other fundraising activities. But it was really when the COVID pandemic began that we went back to our original idea of starting a publishing company. And by then, the publishing industry had changed dramatically. There are a lot of people who do self-publishing, which is it used to not be considered something that was wise to do or smart to do, but now, there are a lot of people who do it and they do it successfully. Um, Publishing had really changed quite a lot. So we had to redo some of our original ideas, but we knew the time had come. Um, I reached out to some of my friends from the different organizations I'd been a part of for decades at that point to ask if they had any authors or people interested in writing their stories. And immediately I was impressed with how many people reached back out and said, yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of folks have asked me about the name. Why did we name it Bell Asteri? So I just kind of wanted to explain that. And a lot of this has to do with my grandma. So I really liked the idea of the word Bella, adding the word that means beautiful in so many different languages. To me, there's something really special about these kids and their families, and they're just beautiful to me. And so I wanted that word in there somehow, the word Bella. And the star is a symbol that means a lot to me personally. I come from the Lone Star State, and I love the Dallas Stars hockey team. This one's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm just going to say it anyway because why not? When I was a little baby and growing up, my parents called me the number one star baby of the universe. I know. Often that got shortened to star baby. And so the star is just a big deal to me, and if you know me, you know that more than any other thing, I love going out into the country and looking up at a sky filled with stars. And so I started thinking about these little kids with cancer and their families, and I wanted them to shine and to sparkle like the stars in the midnight sky. And I kept envisioning that. They're the stars of this show, right? They're the celebrities, they're the stars. And so I thought, Bella Star, Bella Star. But somehow that just didn't stick in my brain as the right name. And then I thought about my grandma. So I told you in the beginning of this that, before when my brother was diagnosed, I definitely didn't realize that cancer happened to grown-ups. And then not long after my brother, my grandma was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was 14, she died of her cancer. And so, as sort of a little bit of a nod to my grandma in heaven, my Greek grandma in heaven, I chose the Greek word for star, which is asteri. So, we kind of well with Bella Asteri. So, that's where Bell Asteri came from. That's how we chose our name. We started at the very end of 2020, thanks to COVID shutting everything down and us realizing that the time was right, and it really took off. Since then, we have formed a 501c3, the Bell Asteri Foundation. We have some incredible board members serving on our board, and we cannot wait to see all the great things that are going to happen. Today, again, is the last day of Childhood Cancer Awareness Month for 2025. But it's not the last day of childhood cancer. We have a long way to go. So I would like to thank you all for your support of our mission. By the way, if you hear that squeak, that's my dog, whose name is Bella. She's got a little squeaky toy. But anyway, we have a long way to go until we can say, hey, we've eradicated childhood cancer. So I want to thank you all for your support of our mission. Our mission is to improve the lives of the children of the cancer community through the art of storytelling. Thank you for buying our books. Thank you for writing your stories and being willing to share your stories. And thank you for tuning in to this special episode of Threads of Gold. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.